and there was that maid, the housekeeper's name that was dropped. The whole courtroom was like, and even Lynn, from being stone-faced, went, and her daughter turned to her and went. There were a couple of jurors, we call her Mean Mug. It was purely an accident. The camera just followed Alec Murdaugh.
Welcome back to the Civil Rights Lawyer channel. I've been asked to do something on the Murdaugh trial, and I want to bring you some inside information about what really happened at the Murdaugh trial. So I reached out to my colleague Larry Foreman. You may know him as the DUI guy from YouTube. He covered much of the Johnny Depp trial from inside the courtroom, and also was able to get into the Alex Murdaugh trial in South Carolina. So I figured, who better to hear from than Larry? He was in the courtroom sitting right next to some of these people, watching the reactions of the jurors and so on. And he's also a trial lawyer. You can find a lot more of Larry's coverage on his YouTube channel. He's also very active on Twitter. I'll post his links in the description. Like me, he's a real lawyer with real courtroom experience that you can watch for yourself on his channel. So here he is. Also, if you haven't already, subscribe to both our channels. So you actually did go to the Murdaugh trial?
I did.
At least
I was in South Carolina 3 times, 3 different occasions, because I had to keep coming back for my own jury trials.
So how many days of testimony did you get to watch?
4 in total. It would have been 6 or 7, but the last trip I just was not able to get in because Alec took the stand and my poll was just not strong enough to get in the courtroom. They were giving priority to people higher above me.
Like, what was the process for you to get into that courtroom?
So there are 2 ways: general public or press. If I had been there since day 1, I probably would have had one of those fancy purple passes, at which point I could come and go as I please, show up a minute before the judge takes the bench, and you're in no matter what, assuming that it's like a lottery. They do a media lottery. Because they did not have enough media to fill in all the seats, and they always had a few leftovers, with the exception of when Alec took the stand. I applied for the media lottery. I kind of sort of got it. I mean, Becky Hill, the court clerk, was the woman to talk to. Becky Hill is amazing. Shout out to you, Becky. She was actually the one that read the verdict yesterday evening. So you got a chance to see her if you have not seen her, because she was obviously not on camera. But Becky is the sweetest, nicest, coolest person. Like, the first day I showed up, the bailiff was like, "Who are you?" I told her my name and who I'm with, and she's like, "All right, I can't let you in." And I was like, I emailed Becky, and she's like, "All right, hold on." And she literally gets on the phone. It's like, "Becky, I have Larry Foreman here." And, oh, all right. Becky says he's in, and it's like, you literally feel like a VIP at a club in LA. I kept making a joke in the line that it feels like for some people, it's easier to get into clubs in Los Angeles, certain exclusive clubs in LA, than it was to get into that trial for some people. And especially me at the very end of my last trip, it was completely jam-packed. But that was one way. So the media lottery. And then general public, you just stand in line whenever people gather, whatever number you are. There's no guarantee you'll get in. Sometimes people leave after lunch. Sometimes people will leave in the middle of the day. And as soon as people leave, relinquish their badges, those badges are handed out if there's people in line.
So was there a lot of people that were unable to get in and waiting outside?
Towards the end, yes. In the beginning, no.
What witnesses did you get to see?
Oh, goodness. A couple of the former employees of the law firm. Professor, Dr. Chief Deputy Officer, what's his name? The expert that they put on. They're a really good one. I actually kind of like him. He's very genuine. I got to see a couple of the lawyers, his former partners. And I got a chance to see a couple of SLED FBI folks. And of course, Michael Gunn. I was there when Michael Gunn testified. He's the real Forge, not the fake Forge. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, Forge was the company that was cutting checks to people who were recovering money in their cases. Well, Alec created his own DBA, doing business as Forge LLC, which was a fake Forge, and calling it Forge so that his accountants would not be able to tell where that money is going. That's how he kept it a secret. He was a very smart man, very talented at deception. He was, before the trial, he was definitely good at it, because he would write a check and he would write it to Forge LLC and then cash it on the back end in his own bank account, his Fifth Third bank account. Meanwhile, his accountants see Forge and they go, oh, that's Forge Consulting, without even doing a double take until it was discovered a few months ago. So I got a chance to see Michael Gunn testify about what Forge is, what he does, who he is, and how, of course, he has no access to that Fifth Third DBA account that Alec Murdaugh was. They've already had exhibits and evidence to show that he was the owner of that account, the sole owner of that account.
Now, did you see any of the Murdoch family in the courtroom watching?
Oh, yes. Every day, every time I was there. And I watched them walk to the courthouse several times.
Did you ever interact with them at all?
No. I was going to. I wanted to interview Buster, but then I found out he's going to testify. So I was like, I'll reserve the interview until after he testifies. And then even after he testified, I backpedaled and I was like, you know what? I just don't feel comfortable. Obviously, no one else is approaching them, and I don't want to be that guy.
Like, how were they acting in there? I mean, were they? Did you get any sense of, were they supportive of the defendant, or?
They were supportive, but they were very stoic. It's a very stoic family. Again, I believe it's a crime family. I haven't watched the Netflix documentary, but people are saying, my sources are telling me that they are very deeply involved in drugs and smuggling and a lot of dirty, dirty shit. That's why I think he was stealing so much money, is to pay off bad people that he was not able to make enough money to pay off. It was not to feed his drug habit. There's no way, no how. But the family was there to support, to show the jury that they still support, that they're behind him. Because if the family ostracizes you, that means you did it. I think that's kind of clear in any human being's mind. You don't need to be a juror or a legal expert. If the family just does not show up at all, it's like, okay, they all think you did it. But if they're there every day, they testified, Buster, his brother, his son, his brother, they all testifying. It's like, well, clearly he's got familial support, so he might be innocent. That was the, I think, impression they were trying to make. And there were moments in the trial when I forget which part it was, but I'll never forget John Marvin's wife. John Marvin is Alec Murdaugh's brother, and he was the last defense witness. But before he took the stand, he was sitting in the pews, and somebody was testifying. I can't remember who, but I do remember his wife, John Marvin's wife was sitting next to him. She was wearing green that day. She had a blonde friend with her, and I think it was a family friend. I don't know who she was. She was there for the first time, and that's the only time I've seen her there. And John Marvin's wife broke down and was crying, and her blonde friend was consoling her. That I remember. And there was another moment that I'll never forget. So his sister, Lynn, had her daughter in the courtroom. And there was one day when there were some names being dropped about Alec Murdaugh was on the stand. Alec Murdaugh was on the stand, and he was testifying about who he bought pills from. And there was that maid, the housekeeper's name that was dropped. The whole courtroom was like, and even Lynn, from being stone-faced, went, and her daughter turned to her and went, and it was like a lot of commotion in the courtroom and even the lady I was sitting next to, who was very, she went to high school with these people. So she's from South Carolina. She wrote down the name and went, oh my God. So it was big. Something big happened. And I'm sitting there going, who is this person? I've never heard of her. I don't know who she is, but clearly everybody but me knows who's from that town. So it was a very big moment. It was one of the only times I personally have seen emotion come from the family, from Lynn, at least. Lynn is very stoic. I mean, you saw Buster, if you watched the sentencing, you saw Buster I thought he was tearing up at one moment, just a little bit, his eyes, maybe I'm hallucinating. I don't know. But they all remain stoic, not a tear shed. And I don't know if you blame it on addiction or just you deal in enough crime and you're just this is just part of the gig. Sometimes you go down.
The one thing you can't see on TV is probably the one thing that we as trial lawyers focus on at a jury trial is, you can actually look at the jury and see how they're reacting to testimony, see what they're like, see what they're paying attention to, see if they're sleeping, see if they're taking notes. I don't know if they're allowed to do that here, but we can't see that on TV. So I'm sure you watched the jury some, while the trial's going on. Did you get any sort of sense of what they were thinking or whether they were paying attention?
Well, I now have the benefit of hindsight, I suppose, then now that we know what the verdict is. So without tainting my opinion, what I'm about to tell you, by the current verdict, I thought they were mixed. I thought that they were very mixed in their, there were a couple of jurors, we call her Mean Mug. Like, for example, Mean Mug, James reported that she had tissues in her ears at one point during, I think it was Alec Murdaugh's testimony, as he was testifying. Like, she just put, maybe it wasn't him, I can't remember, but it was the defense's case. She put tissues. There were 3 women with blankets, and they would literally just cover themselves up, but they were just cold. Several jurors, sometimes you'll find them rest their eyes. And I tell people all the time, they're like, oh my God, are jurors allowed to do that? Jurors are allowed to do anything until the judge says something. And if the judge doesn't say anything other than like, all right, stretch break, for example, when he starts noticing a couple of jurors nodding off. If you're bored at home watching this testimony, there's a reason that the jurors are reacting in a similar fashion. They are human beings as well. People forget that. The human element sometimes is forgotten and is lost on people. If you are listening to a witness and you're just like, oh my God, when will it end? This witness just goes on and dry stuff, like for instance, the financials. They went through like 50 different transactions. By the second, 5th one, the 12th one, we got it. But you have to do 38 more times. And you're bored out of your skull at home going, when is he going to get to the good stuff? What do you think the jury's doing? The jury's doing exactly the same thing as you are, because they're in the exact same position. Only they can't go, all right, I'm going to turn off the TV and I'm going to go make some food. They have to sit there and suffer through it because they can't get up. They have to sit there and listen. If they want to break, all they get is a collective break, and then they get right back into it. So it's very understandable. And like, there's even somebody sent me an article. It's a law review article from some university, convicted by a sleeping jury is the title, I believe. And I haven't read it. I haven't had time. It's very long, obviously, and I haven't had time. But I imagine, and I've read some literature on the topic recently, like yesterday. So, John, when was the last time like you had a case? Have you tried cases?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So
I've tried murder trials.
You've tried murder trials. When was the last time you had a juror? Let's start with this question. When was the last time you had a juror fall asleep in the middle of your trial?
I don't believe I've ever had that happen.
Never? Really?
It might be possible. I don't know.
You probably didn't notice, because trust me, even if they're not asleep, but they might be like resting their eyes for just a little bit. It happens all the time. And I've seen it in my jury trials. Even though they're very, very short, sometimes jurors just get bored. And that's a fact. Now, have I ever seen a judge, and this was going to be my next question, but I guess you kind of already answered it. Well, I was going to say, when was the last time you saw a judge, not just in your cases, how about in the last 100 years of jurisprudence in the United States of America, when was the last time you heard a news story, jurors scolded for sleeping in case? This many. To me, 0. I've never heard it. It doesn't exist. Judges do have the option. But again, the fact is, when the testimony is interesting, captivating, and you're like glued to your screen like this going, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. Do you think there's a juror that's going to be asleep during that part of the testimony? They're sitting just like you are. Like, oh my God, this is fascinating. This is interesting. I'm awake for this. It's human nature. You cannot forget the human element.
What were your thoughts on the jury coming back with a verdict after only 3 hours? We're talking about 5 weeks of testimony, then 3 hours. I mean, my immediate thought as a defense lawyer would be that that's good.
Yeah.
I mean, usually a quick verdict, for the defense. I mean, that the prosecutor usually is getting nervous if they're coming back quickly.
The actual time, I believe, is like 2 hours, 45 minutes, give or take. But that's not even the point. It's worse than that. A juror gave an interview this morning to Good Morning America. Did you hear about this?
I saw something on it where he said he made up his mind from the beginning, and they talked about it for 45 minutes. I don't know if that was
45 minutes. Yeah, that's exactly it. It's 45 minutes. They came in, they had a decision. They just did not want to come out with a verdict because they were afraid of what people might think of them coming back so quickly, which the damage is still done. It's just a day late. You know what I mean? The news is coming out anyway, just a day late, that they deliberated for only 45 minutes. And that just tells me, I don't know. I don't know if I scolded Jim Griffin, the one who did the closing in my live on my channel, the DUI guy plus. Literally, I went through and I explained why I think his closing should have been stronger, and he should have had more visual aids with respect to reasonable doubt to like pound into the jurors, that because the prosecutor kept dragging the standard down to common sense, and it's the defense's job to show what the standard is beyond a reasonable doubt. If the jury decided based on common sense, that is the defense's fault. The defense has to hammer home countless times, and Jim definitely did not do enough of this, apparently, what reasonable doubt is, how many reasonable doubts we have. List them, make it visual, make them see it. Like in my latest trial that I had, February 10th, it's on my YouTube channel. It's called the 6-minute verdict. And there was a reason for that. The jury went out at 4:32 p.m., came back 4:38, not guilty. In the business, we call that a 3-word verdict, not guilty. One of the things that I did in my closing, which I think was very effective, and people have pointed this out to me too in the comments section, I went through one by one. I took all of the evidence that the prosecutor had, like the horizontal gaze nystagmus, the walk and turn, the possession of an open container, absence of this, absence of that, no video. And each and every single one of these, I was like, that's a reasonable doubt in and of itself. That's a reasonable, and it's all visual. It's on a PowerPoint. It's in your face. And then at the very end, I had like 13 on one screen. It's very powerful. I've seen prosecutors shudder. And I said, each one individually by itself, just one is enough for a not guilty verdict. Like, I don't know why defense lawyers are so afraid to say that, because the burden is not on us. Some defense lawyers feel like they have to prove their client's innocence. That's not the standard. But the problem is, in a small town, sometimes it's hard to, convince people of that.
Back to Murdaugh. Do you think he was guilty of the murder?
100%. Oh yeah. If not him pulling the trigger, he's involved in some way, shape, or form. I think he was there. I have this whole cartel theory that I released on my channel, not this Friday, but last Friday, which was, I don't know when this video is going to air, but today's March 3rd. So that was February 25th. I was still in 24th. I was still in South Carolina, so feel free to check out my channel. Like I said, it's the DUI Guy Plus, and it's on there.
I'll link that and your videos on this in the description
below. Yeah, thanks. If you're outside of South Carolina, let me just put it to you this way. If you're outside of South Carolina, you can chalk it up as far-fetched, BS, I don't believe it, this is so weird, nope, stop making stuff up. If you're from there, it's like, oh my God, how do you not know? Yes, they're a crime family. Yes, they're all dirty. Yes, they're all this. Yes, they're all that. Depends on where you are in the country and how you look at this case. That's another huge factor that you have to consider, because we don't know what the jurors knew and what they didn't know about the family and what they admitted to and what they didn't admit to. Because it's possible that they convicted. Somebody mentioned in the chat earlier today, actually, they said, they're from South Carolina, and they said South Carolina jurors, this is the direct quote, the South Carolina jury voted the way that they did because the South Carolina jurors are afraid to go against the grain, meaning against the public opinion. And the public opinion is he's guilty of sin. It doesn't matter if the evidence is there or not. We just have to convict, because if we don't, we're going to be in the hot seat for the rest of our lives because it's small town. Everybody knows everyone. Eventually, people will find out who we are. We had that slip up with Law and Crime or Court TV's camera, whichever one it was. I don't know. I'm not even dinging them because it was purely an accident. The camera just followed Alec Murdaugh. The judge called it out today in court after the sentencing. The camera just followed Alec, and it went past the jury, and all the jurors' faces were captured. One of the women on the jury was smiling as Alec Murdaugh went by after they announced the verdict of guilty. I thought that was completely disgusting and inappropriate. Small town politics have absolutely won the day with this trial. There was reasonable doubt, and the jury ignored it. I stand by it. I know Danny is, I think, is in agreement. I believe Nick Requeta is of the same opinion. Peter Tragos. Danny Endirect is who I'm talking about. So we have a minority of lawyers, maybe even the majority at this point. I don't know. But we all feel that he is guilty, and he was like, we understand why he was found guilty. And in the background, with all the information that we possess, the Netflix and all that, even though I still haven't watched it, there's a lot of finger pointing at like he's involved 100%. He has some knowledge. He's not sharing. He's done something. He caused this to happen. But did he pull the trigger? Again, I don't see a motive. I just don't, much like a lot of other people, we don't get it. What was the justification?
Yeah, it's, I mean, they clearly didn't like him, you know, I mean, 3-hour verdict. I think my last jury trial, I did a plumbing dispute case, and it was maybe a 3-day trial, something like that. And we had 3-hour deliberation over a plumbing dispute. You know, so to think that you're gonna have a 3-hour deliberation over somebody's life, and
well, according to the jury, it was 45 minutes even. You know, the juror that gave the interview, they deliberated for 45 minutes and then sat around, twiddled their thumbs, and cooked their eggs for 2 hours.
I figured that guy is just not likable. You know, the small town stuff, everybody knows him anyways. Plus, you know, they've seen all the pretrial publicity on it. And he just doesn't seem likable to me.
I will agree there. There's no way I can spin it and say, oh, he's a great... No, he's a thief, a liar, a manipulator, a scumbag who stole from people living and dead in personal injury cases. Like, who does that? Would it have flown with another jury in another place with all the reasonable doubt there if you take the small town politics out of it? That is a question to ponder.
Do you think it was a mistake for him to take the stand?
People are saying yes. I don't know. I think he did well, but then again, he was talking to his peers. So it may have struck differently for an outsider than it did for his peers.
And if it's a reasonable doubt case, I mean, he's potentially answering questions that were unanswered, and perhaps it's better to have as many unanswered questions as possible if it's a reasonable doubt case. But I suspect there's no way he was going to win that trial, like you said, with that small town Southern jury. It's sort of like To Kill a Mockingbird. You know, Atticus Finch could say whatever he wants to say, and the truth can be whatever it is, but it's not necessarily going to make any difference.
I guess I was just hopeful that reasonable doubt would win the day, and I was wrong.
You know of any substantial issues for appeal that may come up?
Not substantial, but they do have a million of them. This judge has made so many rulings that were improper, but you and I both know 999,996 of those million are going to be harmless error, and the other 4, the Court of Appeals is going to say not enough for a reversal, judgment affirmed.
Yeah, no appellate judge even probably is going to go out on that limb. You know, where the public consensus is just so in favor of throwing this guy in prison, locking away the key. I mean, they're not gonna take that on.
No. Thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun. I just want to give a shout out to my homeboy Josh White, because I know you're watching this. Um, he watches your channel a lot. I told you about him. I just wanted to plug that in
Yeah.
so that.
Thanks for watching, Josh. I appreciate it.
There you go. See, I told you, man. He's been telling me to reach out to you, and but he had his own, self-interested motivators as to why I should reach out to you. And I was like, dude, I'll reach out to him and I'll reach out to him. Relax.
Yeah, well, stay in touch and I mean, let's talk again. All right, man. Well, we'll get back to it. Thanks again.
All right, brother. Thanks
Talk
so
to you
much.
later.
Don't forget to like and subscribe, comment below.